Hello everyone, it's brilliant to be here today. As kindly introduced by Jenny, my name is Holly Seglah and I'll be chatting today about our Black Women's Reproductive Health Project. The project started about 2 years ago under Freedom for Girls and we're now working with the African Pop Project. So a little bit about our project origins and aims. The project started in the summer of 2020 and was inspired by the spike in the Black Lives Matter movement after the murder of George Floyd. As a group of volunteers, we really wanted to contribute and create positive and long-lasting change for Black African and Black Caribbean women in relation to their menstrual and reproductive health needs. And so the Black Women's Reproductive Health Project was born. With the key focus of examining the impacts of systemic racism and unconscious racial bias on the access to and quality of reproductive and menstrual health care, with a specific focus on Black African and Black Caribbean women and women of African and Caribbean descent. So some of our key project aims and outcomes include firstly our Black Women's Reproductive Health report, which was published earlier this year. This report sets out the current research gaps as well as sets out and details our primary research findings and analysis. We also continue to seek to provide access to education, information and resources to Black women, as well as continue to deliver online peer support group sessions and also create safe and supportive spaces. Finally, we seek to work to engage with the wider female healthcare community, including healthcare providers, to educate and challenge existing systems and the racial disparities that exist for Black women that they face. So moving on to our scope and methodology. Over the last 24 months, the project team has conducted surveys, ran focus group discussions, peer support groups, and ran a literature review. We've tried to incorporate participatory research approaches wherever possible, so we can be sure that we're conducting research with and for Black women and not on Black women, in order to really capture those real-life experiences of Black women when seeking care for their menstrual and reproductive health needs, which we found to be extremely lacking in current research. Our focus groups, given it was COVID for most of the project's time, were ran over Zoom, and they were designed to provide this deeper dive into survey responses. Our peer support groups, also hosted over Zoom, sought to create an inclusive and participant-led safe environment to discuss a range of different menstrual and reproductive health matters. And for our literature review, this was organised across 3 main overarching areas, this being women's experiences of menstruation, Black British women's specific experiences of menstruation, and the impact of structural racism on healthcare outcomes amongst Black women. So as of June 2022, we had 168 survey responses, of which 160 were used for further analysis. For our focus group discussions, 9 participants took part, with 2 participants asking to do a one-to-one focus group instead. Our peer support groups included 8 participants across 4 different sessions, which covered a range of different matters relating to menstrual and reproductive health care. And our literature review found a lot of gaps, but mainly that there was simply a complete lack of research, specifically examining the real-life experiences of Black women when seeking care and support for their menstrual and reproductive health needs. Where there was research, it was extremely US-centric, and it came under our favourite word, BAME, the BAME umbrella. So now to move on to our report and project results and findings. Some general background information. 80% of survey respondents reported being 25 years or older. 94% reported identifying as Black African, Black Caribbean, or of mixed ethnicity, and 84% of participants, when asked to rank their health from 1 to 10, 1 being poor, 10 being excellent, 84% ranked their health as 6 and above. So moving further into our results, we asked participants through the survey about their menstrual health issues suffered. And here we found that 74% of survey respondents suffered from 2 or more diagnoses or symptoms. 25% of survey respondents suffered from 4 or more symptoms and diagnoses, and 91% of these missed work due to chronic pain. Of this also, 37% missed work 6 or more times a year. And as you can see on the slide, here was a range of different symptoms and diagnoses experienced by our survey respondents. Linking to missed work, Of the 158 responses to this question, 65% of respondents reported having missed work at least once within the last year. And of this 65%, 35% indicated that they had not sought support for their menstrual or reproductive health needs. The causes of absence from work included chronic pain, which was the lead cause, and followed closely by heavy bleeding. And as you can also see on the slide, other reasons for having to miss work given by our respondents included PMDD, depression, continuous bleeding, immobility, fainting, and vomiting. We then moved on to ask our survey participants, as well as focus group and peer support group participants, about the access to care and support that they had. On this, 61% of survey respondents indicated that they had sought support from their GP, whereas 23% indicated that they had never looked for support. Quite a lot of survey respondents indicated that they sought other support. This included, for example, finding support online, undertaking their own research, or seeking support from family and friends. From the focus group discussions, 75% of participants indicated that they had sought support from their GP, but that this did not lead to a positive outcome. And similarly, in the peer support groups, participants expressed that when they sought support from their GP, they felt the need to use excessive or a degree of verbal force just to be able to secure a much needed referral for further investigation. So next, we examined the barriers that were faced by our beneficiaries. From the survey, we found that 92% of our respondents faced some form of barrier when trying to seek care and support for their menstrual health needs, such as, for example, barriers due to lack of information and education, being unsure what support services were available, a lack of representation, or having had poor previous experiences. Participants also chose other forms of barriers, including doctors being dismissive or disbelieving, and respondents were also facing being misdiagnosed and facing incorrect assumptions. Overall from this, 59% of respondents reported facing 2 or more barriers when seeking support. These findings were also echoed in our peer focus group discussions, whereby participants agreed that when they went to the doctor or GP, it was really a waste of time, that they were likely to be disbelieved, dismissed, or that their experiences of their menstrual or reproductive health was going to be minimised. So we went on to ask what kind of support would be beneficial to our chosen cohort. And from this, 90% of survey respondents indicated that there are other forms of support that they would find beneficial. Many responded that different kinds of workshops would be beneficial, including menstrual and reproductive health education workshops, empowerment workshops, and so your own pad workshops. Others chose other forms of beneficial support, and this included education for men, time off work, and a general wider societal understanding of women's menstrual health in general. So, with those findings in mind from our small study, our report discussion is split into 4 key areas. Firstly, pain awareness, and general health. Here, we really recognised that through our project and our findings, there was a disconnect between general health and the experiences of menstrual and reproductive pain experienced by our participants. For example, more than 80% of our participants indicated that their health was 6+, yet 70% experienced period pain or chronic pelvic pain. And so we advocate that this disconnect between menstrual and reproductive pain and general health needs to be explored further, as well as increased research into systemic racism and exactly how this influences pain being easily dismissed in the first place. We also examined in a little bit more detail missed work, seeing as 65% of our survey respondents had missed work at least once due to their menstrual or reproductive health needs in the last year. Now, of course, missing work has a range of adverse impacts on an individual, not only economic loss or impacts on psychological health. And so as a project, we really seek to advocate for menstrual and reproductive health literacy across all sectors, whether that's healthcare or education, as well as advocating for further flexible approaches to work generally. We also examined the lack of good quality menstrual reproductive education. And here in the report, we really sought to highlight the impacts of being unfamiliar with terminology when you're in healthcare settings. and how being unfamiliar with terms, conditions even, how that can impact an individual's diagnoses or even the accuracy of diagnoses. And again, here we advocate for greater menstrual and reproductive education, with the side note that education is not going to solve structural racism, but we genuinely believe that education is so important for empowerment and particularly for increasing self-advocacy. Finally, on our report discussion, we also examined failures in access to support and care. As highlighted by our results, 92% of survey participants faced barriers when seeking care and support, so we really wanted to examine this further. In doing so, our discussion highlights the additional barriers created by misogyny in creating additional barriers for individuals when seeking care. And we also highlight the importance of representation of Black women in the very organisations that are providing care in the first place. So, some of the key takeaways from our project so far include, firstly, that there is a lack of sufficient research providing sufficient awareness and insight into menstruation and reproductive health needs and the specific experiences of Black women to begin with. Secondly, we find that there remains to be a disconnect with our understanding of Black women's experiences of menstrual and reproductive health care across the whole lifespan, including outside of pregnancy and postpartum. We also recognise that there continues to be a concerning lack of education, awareness and appropriate care and support in the broader menstrual and reproductive health issues. And finally, again, there is such a need for quantitative and qualitative data so that we can all better understand the unique and individualistic health needs and barriers in accessing care for Black women. And so our recommendations are kind of interlinking and again reiterate what's already been spoken about, including especially there is an unbelievable need for further research and data to begin with. But further in this, that then we advocate that there does need to be an enhancement of education and access to support. And in this, there needs to be research into how specifically Black women would like to receive information and access to support. As well as a better understanding of pain needs to be developed. Not just a better way for us all to be able to articulate pain, but also an increased awareness between healthcare practitioners and the healthcare community as to the racial biases in interpreting pain of Black women. So finally, our future steps as a project. Firstly, we need funding. We are a very small project, and if we want to continue doing our great work, funding is key, so we're currently on the lookout for any funding opportunities. We also hope to continue to deliver peer support group sessions, as well as undertake a range of collective activism. We further hope to continue to campaign for racial equity in the menstrual and reproductive health space, disseminate our research findings to healthcare providers, and finally develop empowering educational programs and resources for beneficiaries. Thank you so much for listening. Please do read the report. It does a much better job than I have at summarising our fantastic findings. And you can either email us at our Gmail account or follow us on Instagram should you wish to get involved at any stage. Thank you. Fabulous. Yes, sorry, question, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm very interested in your reference to verbal force and it goes to GP. Why do you think that is?
So yeah, this is something that came up in our peer support groups. So they mentioned that in order to actually get their point across that they were in pain, that they needed further help, that a GP wasn't going to be able to fix, they felt the need to have to use verbal force to actually be heard in the first place. So it's a very alarming finding that the fact that participants felt that they themselves had to use force to just get their point across and to actually be heard in the first place. So those are really the words from the peer support group. I hope that answers your question.
A reference to Asian pain when I get when I get a referral for various radiological investigations. Mm-hmm. And when I've asked what Asian pain is, I kind of get they can't really explain, but they're obviously taught in medical school, ignore Asian pain, or because the physio, it's just a psychological pain this person's got, it's not a real pain. So I'm just aware that everything is just kind of like pushed to the side. We don't have to pay for it. We're not going to spend £400 on that MRI for you.
Definitely.
You know, we'll let you die of lupus a week before your 40th birthday. So when these things happen to me, I'm kind of like, look, brings this lecture. She said,
Exactly. No, thank you. And I think it's so important. It links a little bit back to Jenny's point on trying to push back against these stereotypes. Like, these stereotypes are persistent, and until we share our best practice examples of how we've managed to push through them, it's really hard to know, oh, actually, you know, I feel completely justified in using verbal force because you are not listening to me, and I've heard from other women that this is what they've had to do, so I'm going to do it too. And I think this is the really important thing about peer support groups. They actually facilitate this conversation and this like intergroup learning, which is really, really invaluable. So thank you so much for your point. Please go ahead. Sorry, I'm going to jump out of the screen. Sorry, up on the white jumper.
Hi, so I'm a gynecology trainee. So your last point about having black women in gynae services. So I found out that obstetrics and gynecology has the second highest number of people of colour in training and in the workforce. We also have one of the highest numbers of women. We have the third highest number of international medical graduates. So technically we are incredibly diverse.
Yes.
However, we also have the greatest number of staff burnout and attrition. So there's obviously issues with supporting the staff within women and reproductive health. And I find it frustrating, but also interesting that actually patients don't see us. And although those numbers are higher, it's still a white-dominated, pale male stale.
No, of course, yeah. No, that's fantastic. Round of applause for that phrasing. That was brilliant. That was really brilliant. Thank you.
And so I find it. I'm frustrated that actually we're not seen, and our patients don't recognise the work that women are doing within gynae. I don't know what they suggested for us particularly. For me.
Sorry. No, completely. I think thank you so much. That's an excellent point. I mean, why do you think that you're not being seen in this space? Because no, sorry, just a rhetorical. And this is exactly one of the main parts of why we need more research. We just don't know why it's not translating through. On paper, it should be. Like you say, you've got the highest percentage, this, that, and the other, and yet you're not seen. So we need to be working with healthcare providers. We need to be working all together on all sides, because this is so multifaceted. Like, we don't know where the dots can connect. So yeah, I don't have an answer for you directly, but I completely hear you. And I think research has to be the start of how we can create changes so that you are seen, because you are very much needed in these spaces. Yeah, sorry, I don't know who was first. Sorry.
The scope for FGM and menopause in your research. I really want you to answer because some of these.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I will find that for you from the report myself. Yep, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question. Well done with everything. It's been fantastic what you've been doing. So in relation to how you plan to disseminate and use this information to arm the next generation of medical professionals.
Yep.
The reason I ask, my daughter's in year 6 med school, and
Yep.
we spend a disproportionate amount of time having to encourage her and reinforce her and almost fight her battles or encourage her sometimes not to fight the battles. But she has to personally, along with her student colleagues, advocate for pain relief for black patients.
Yep.
And she literally has, on a regular basis, white midwives and consultant gynecologists saying, oh, that's how they are, that's what they feel like. So she's in a house with 4 or 5 black medical students, and they're on the phone to us all the time. What do I do? She can't advocate by herself. And one of the hospitals, I'm not going to name them, one of the hospitals named in this report. And, you know, we had to really work with her. Are we going to report this to the people who should be doing something or not? Just for her own sanity. So
of course.
How are we going to educate the next generation?
No, definitely, it's a great question. I'm sorry that your daughter's having to fight so hard. It's a shame that she has to, but it's a very common story and it shouldn't be that way. So at the moment, what we're doing is a very small volunteer-led team. Sorry, last
No, you're doing great, don't worry.
As a very small volunteer-led team, we're working in partnership with healthcare providers. We are very small and we're trying to develop our networks, but we can't do this alone. And this is one thing why we're prioritising collective activism, because we know there's so many amazing people out there with so much motivation and inspiration to make change, but we can't do it by ourselves. And I think we all need to come together and find ways to move forward and work together to create this long-lasting change, because otherwise, every single individual is fighting their own battle and it's exhausting.
And the burnout.
Exactly, and the burnout. So you see the dots? Yeah, the dots. And I'm going to pass over to the next presentation, but please feel free to chat to me in the break if you have any further questions.
Wow, Holly, what an inspiring talk. Thank you so much.